Good evening. Welcome to the community webinar for Kilnside Energy Park. We'll just give you another minute or two to let everyone have a chance to join, and then we'll get started. All right, shall we get started? So as I said, this is the community webinar for Kilnside Energy Park. My name is Emily Sharp. I work for a company called Sec Newgate, and our role is to provide community engagement on behalf of the project. Can we do some introductions, starting with Aaron?
Thank you, Emily. So my name's Aaron, and I'm the development manager at Orkera. So I'll be responsible for taking forward the planning application. Rosie?
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, my name's Rosie. I work for Akira. I'm the community liaison manager. So I work really closely with the PR and comms teams, as well as working alongside the development team, to be more mindful about the community initiatives alongside the project.
Sophie?
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm a town planner at a company called Arup, and we are providing planning and environmental assessment services to Orkera.
And Kaylee.
Hi everyone, my name is Kaylee. I work with Emily at Sec Newgate, and I'm just going to be assisting with the communications on the project and the public engagement.
So just some quick housekeeping. This session is being recorded, and you can view the recording through our website after the fact. If you are aware of anybody who wasn't able to make it tonight, please do direct them to that recording. The agenda is going to be that we will present a few slides to explain the project and explain the development process before turning it over to questions. So you can enter your questions. If you look at the bottom of the screen, there should be a Q&A function. Looks a bit different on whatever device you are viewing it from, but it's generally a square with a question mark. Through that function, you can type whatever questions you will have, and then when we get to the end of the presentation, we will go through those. And we do encourage you to ask whatever you have to the top of your mind. Kaylee, can we go to the next slide, please? So as I said, it's a two-part agenda. So we're going to start out introducing the project, and then we'll explain the development process and the steps that are ahead. With that, can I turn it over to Aaron?
Thank you very much. Yeah, just straight over to the next slide, please, Kaylee. So I thought it'd just be helpful, first of all, just to introduce Orkera and also Kilnside Energy Park. So Kilnside Energy Park is the brand that we've come up with for the solar farm and the plan application, and Orkera is the developer. So Orkera specialises in energy generation and storage projects, working through to from the earliest stages of planning to building, owning and operating these projects ourselves. And that's where we sort of are different from other developers out there or applications that you've seen, whereby it's our intention to own and operate. Hence why we're putting quite a big emphasis on trying to get involved with the community, understand what you want, because if we are successful, we're going to be here for quite a long time. And so we notice as quite a good opportunity to work closely with local communities. As you can see on the right-hand side there, these are just some examples of the projects we have in construction. So that's up in Benthead, North Ayrshire in Scotland, all the way down to Gaylord down in Kent in England. So as you can see, 4 of them there are solar farms, and then the one in Scotland is a solar farm and battery energy storage scheme. So similar to what we are producing at Kilnside or preparing, albeit at a slightly lesser scale. And then, yeah, just as we say there at the bottom, so Kaylee, thank you. We always work with local communities to help ensure there are local benefits and help support local needs as we move forward. Obviously, as we sort of own and build, we can also look to use local suppliers where appropriate, so then the local community can actually see some benefit from these proposals. Just on to the next slide, please. So just a simple definition of what Kilnside Energy Park is. So it's a proposed solar farm and battery energy storage. And as you may have seen on the information you've been shared, it will be located to the northwest of Great Casterton in Rutland, and on land either side of the A1, and will connect into the national grid near Ryle. Next slide, please. So apologies, don't want to teach how to suck eggs. I'm sure many of you are well versed in this with sort of adjacent schemes nearby. But just to understand what is a solar farm when we say that. So the sort of two elements that we look at, there's a sort of technical element, which you can see here. So that's the solar voltaic panels themselves, the underground cabling, which connects the panels to the other infrastructure on site and also to the national grid. There's the inverters, which change the current from DC into AC. And then there's a battery energy storage system. So these are sort of shipping containers of large batteries. They store any energy that isn't used by the solar farm or generated. So for example, when the sun's shining and the national grid demand isn't that high, they can then store them in there. So then no one, the sort of energy generated isn't wasted. And then say, for example, later on when the sun is no longer shining, people have come home from work, put the kettle on, started making food. Yeah, those batteries can then put power back into the system. So it's just a way of sort of balancing out the power and also making sure that any energy isn't wasted that solar farm generates. And then finally, there's a substation which will be on site. So that collects electricity from the inverters and the battery energy storage and transfers it to national grid. Next slide, please, Kaylee. Thank you very much. So as I say, there's sort of two parts to a solar farm. There's the sort of technical element, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But then there's also the other part of this the solar farm. So these can be, for example, green spaces. So a well-designed solar farm includes green spaces between and around the panels. And these are areas to protect existing wildlife and create new habitats to help increase biodiversity. So in general, solar farms are good habitats where wildlife can flourish. The mix of native grasses under and around the panels can support a diverse ecosystem of insects, birds, bats, small mammals, and other wildlife. And solar farms are quiet places that require little activity for maintenance, allowing wildlife to thrive beneath and between the panels. And then we'll also set aside areas to support the existing wildlife and create new habitats to support the native species. So these will be informed by our environmental assessments and consultation with technical experts, also including sort of local wildlife groups, the Environment Agency and National England. And that will also be a commitment to sort of biodiversity net gain within there. I understand it comes in next year, but obviously that will be at the forefront of our sort of ecological strategy. But the green space isn't just limited to what's helpful for a landscape perspective. It can also be used to create buffers around homes, create standoffs, and maybe reduce some of that visual impact. And obviously, there's also the public rights of ways which we'll maintain throughout the scheme, sizable offsets around them to ensure that these are protected. And then there could also be new permissive paths to expand recreational opportunities across the site. So as we will come on to later on in this presentation, we'll be undergoing a series of design workshops where we want to engage with the local communities and understand what you would like to see from this solar farm, just so then we can, either minimise the impact of it on yourselves, or also so you can actually see some benefit from the proposals. Next slide, please, Kaylee. So just a quick slide on why we need solar power. So the last coal-fired power station in the UK closed just last year, and we now need renewable energy sources to come online to replace older forms of energy. In addition to that, the UK has set a target for clean power by 2035 to help in the fight against climate change, support energy security, and reduced energy costs. So obviously, as we cut our reliance on fossil fuels, including coal and natural gas, to generate electricity, this means we need more renewable energy sources such as wind and solar to come online and replace them. And yeah, just a little final fact there that demand for electricity is also projected to double by 2050. Next slide, please. So just an understanding of how much energy we need. So it's been set that we need to increase our solar capacity from 17 gigawatts to 65 gigawatts by 2035. So our project's at 400 megawatts, which is just under half a gigawatt. So that's quite a sizable contribution in one project alone. And then there's just a little explanation at the bottom of watts to kilowatts to megawatts to gigawatts, just to try and give a bit more information about scale. But apologies, I'm sure with sort of other schemes nearby, you're pretty familiar with this sort of stuff already. And then comes down to the sort of the project specifics, and I'm sure a question you've been asking is why this location. So we can only put new solar farms in where there is capacity within the national grid system. So National Grid have identified this 400 kV power line. So that's the sort of yellow dotted route you can see through the middle of that image there on the left-hand side. And they have found that there is spare capacity there. So we've got an agreement with National Grid to supply energy to that section of the 400 kV between Ryle and Keswick. So What you'll see there is you can see there's almost 3 cable routes. These are the sort of dashed lines. So one goes north, one goes east, and one goes southeast. And the reason why there's 3 cable routes at the moment is we have an agreement to join into this 400 kV line at a point between Ryle and Kasich. And so the National Grid have not yet confirmed where this will be. So hence at the moment, we just have to secure all options. So we're looking at the environmental impact of sort of all 3 cable routes. Our gut feeling on where this will be is, I don't know if many people are aware, there is the Wemel consultation, the Western Marshes Eastern Link. So National Grid are putting in a new substation just slightly off plan to the north, around 12 kilometres to the north. My gut feeling is that this is where we would be likely to go. I can't see it likely that National Grid would pay to put a new substation there, but then also, in addition, pay to extend Ryle, because that needs an extension to connect there, or put another one in somewhere in between. That is my gut feeling of where we will go. However, until National Grid have confirmed that in writing and said your connection point is here, at the moment we just have to explore all 3 routes. So that's why you'll see quite a convoluted cable route area. But as soon as we have a bit more confirmation where we're going to go, we'll of course let everybody know and then roll out some of those other cable route corridors. And then in addition to that, so we use that as a sort of a centre of research. So that 400 kV line to understand where we need to be near. Typically it's around 10 kilometres in proximity there to make sure they're deliverable. And then we look for flat or gently south-facing topography, a lack of environmental designations such as ancient woodlands or sites of special scientific interest. We tried to locate these away from population centres with good accessible routes, which avoids towns and villages. And we look for good natural screening, so surrounded by existing hedgerows to help reduce visual impacts. And then just finally, we looked within the local plan, and Rutland identified this as an area opportunity for solar. So that sort of helped define why we looked there in this location. So that has then left us to this concept plan. So the map there shows the area we are considering for the project. However, not all of this land will be used. So this just sort of defines the project area and boundary. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of that there will be solar panels. Obviously, as I said before, we need to look at landscape and visual assessments and undertake further surveys to understand where these are quite intrusive. We need to identify landscape and ecological buffers as well. So at the moment, we don't have a design for the plan. We just have a sort of total area. So that's what you can see there on the yellow on that plan there. But we will refine the project design through engagement and consultation with technical bodies, stakeholders, and members of the community to ensure that the project is developed in a way that is sensitive to the local environment and the community. Just over to Sophie for the next section.
Thanks, Aaron. Could I have the next slide, please, Kaylee? So this is just an overview of the planning process for those who might not know. So the proposed development would generate more than 50 megawatts, and as a result, it's classed as a nationally significant infrastructure project, or an NSIP. Consequently, we're required to apply for a development consent order as opposed to a planning application, and that's required under the Planning Act 2008. And the development consent order application would be decided by the relevant Secretary of State. So in this case, as it's an energy project, it'd be the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, and that follows from a recommendation from the Planning Inspectorate. One example of how DCO applications are different to planning applications is that the policy framework which they're assessed against is a bit different. So we are going to be assessed against the national policy statements as opposed to the national planning policy framework, or the NPPF, and local plans. Next slide, please. And over to you, Emily, for this one.
Yes, so before we can submit our DCO application, we are required to consult on the project. This pre-application consultation is a very important part of the development because it makes sure that we've got local knowledge built into our design. At this point, we have just begun to engage with Rutland County Council, as well as some of the other technical bodies, which include Natural England, the Environment Agency, National Highways, and Historic England. And next, coming later this autumn, is when we'll start engaging with local communities through a series of design workshops and site visits and other meetings ahead of a formal consultation period, which will start next year. Next.
Okay, so we're required to complete what's called an environmental impact assessment, or an EIA. That's effectively a multi-stage process for identifying and assessing any potential significant impacts on the environment if the project is consented. So we're at the very start of this process at the moment. What's called the scoping stage. So this is where we formally request the planning inspectorate to state their formal opinion, otherwise known as the scoping opinion, as to the scope and level of detail of the environmental statement, which is a key part of the DC application. It's effectively a comprehensive suite of assessments that support the application. So on Friday, we submitted our scoping opinion request, and the planning inspectorate is due to provide their scoping opinion on the last working day of July. I think it's 29th of July. And that's at the stage we're at currently. We will then be publishing our preliminary results as the next stage. And then after that, we will be preparing our environmental statement later on this year. So this slide just presents a high-level timeline of the project. We're right at the start of the process, as I said. We're at scoping, summer 2025. We will then be having some more stakeholder engagement activity throughout the rest of the year into autumn. And then between January and February, we've programmed a formal consultation period, and that leads up to an anticipated application submission. We're currently looking at October within autumn 2026. And based on example DCOs of a similar nature and how long they've taken to determine, we're assuming a decision by spring 2028.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our presentation. We're going to start turning to the questions that you have entered. I'm going to start with two questions about the grid connection. This will be for Aaron. So the first question is, the substation at Ryle will be at capacity when Mallard Pass Solar Farm begins generating, and at present does not have the facility to allow battery storage to be put into the grid. What will National Grid need to do to allow energy from Kilnside to be put into the grid? And the second question, which is a bit related, is when we asked for this site to be considered at the start of the Mallard Pass scheme, we were told that this was too far from the Ryle substation. I also understand that if Mallard Pass, when producing power at full capacity, the Ryle substation is not able to take this power, how are you going to feed it in? Is this by using the on-site storage? So Aaron, are you able to take those?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, absolutely right. Ryle needs an extension to it in order to be able to facilitate Mallard's Pass and this. So at some point along that line that we showed earlier on. So if it does need to go to Ryle, it'll be an extension of that substation. So we won't be able to connect there until that substation upgrade is completed. That substation upgrade will be completed by National Grid. So completely correct. That will be required in order to facilitate this development. Yeah, but unfortunately at the moment we don't know just where the new substation is going to be. It's obviously between those 2 points. As I sort of said earlier, my gut feeling is that it's towards the north. But that's only my gut feeling, and only National Grid will be able to confirm to us where we're going to connect to. Regarding the points on, I think, distance from Ryle substation, as I said, we sort of use a 10-kilometre buffer in terms of a connection point as a sort of general rule of thumb to start looking for sites, and within a sort of, you put your point of connection in the middle and do a buffer from that. That seems to work for us, but I'm not sure if it's different for different developers.
All right, thank you. The next two questions are really about site selection. So Sophie, these may be for you. The first question says, firstly, what has particularly attracted you to this area? Secondly, as you've used the word community many times already, was any consideration given in the evaluation to the fact that we already have a huge solar farm being imposed on us 1 mile down the road? And the second question, similar, says you avoid SSIs, but not people. Does this define your priorities policy over people?
Okay, so just to start with the first question about why here. So as we touched on in the slides, the applicant has secured a grid connection for this particular part of the existing 400 kV line. And then after that, they've secured the land agreements. And in terms of site selection, it's the sort of availability of land, the grid connection, the topography, lack of environmental constraints, and that's led to defining the site. In terms of the existing solar farm 1 mile away, we are acutely aware of the proximity of the site to Mallard Pass. What I would say is, obviously, at the moment, all we've presented is a boundary. Not all of that will be developed into solar panels. The next stage is the design workshops. We're going to think very carefully about where solar panels might go and where is more appropriate to leave open or to leave for environmental mitigation or enhancement. So those decisions are yet to be made. Sorry, Emily, there was a question in the middle that I've forgotten between those
It
two.
says you avoid triple SIs but not people.
Oh, yeah. So in terms of proximity to Pickworth, for example, again, it's the point I was making is that I appreciate the boundary does look very close to the village, but that doesn't go to say that we will be putting panels that close to the village. Those decisions are yet to be made.
All right. Well, that segues nicely to the design process. We have 2 questions around that. It says you're totally surrounding a farmhouse, etc. Is this acceptable? And we also have a question that says, why do you have to go so close to the hamlet of Pickworth? If residents are a concern to you, surely 100 meters is insufficient, or will you put commercial before amenity? Aaron, can you talk a bit about the design process?
Yeah, sure. So as we touched on briefly, we'll be undertaking some design workshops later in the year. So that's involving stakeholders at all level, national technical consultees, county councils, etc., and also the local residents, because we understand, 1, you'll be the most impacted, and 2, you will know the area the best. So we'll be undertaking those design workshops, and you'll receive communications about them. We think they're going to be before Christmas, so autumn, winter of this year. And we'll sort of work with you guys to understand where, what your requests are, how you'd like to see the design. As Sophie said, we just have a boundary at the moment. We don't have a design. The boundary does go tight to Pickworth and to other residential receptors, such as that farm and those houses in the middle in that triangle. We're very aware of that. We need to undertake some surveys and assess the landscape and visual impact to make sure that a happy balance has been achieved. Not only to reduce the impact on local communities, but also, with any chance of getting a successful permission, we also need to show that we have considered landscape and visual impact. So we need to balance it to secure a good permission and also to work close with the community. As I said, we're conscious if we're successful, we're going to be here for a long time. So we want to start off on the right foot. So yeah, we'll be in touch about those design workshops. Then we will hopefully be able to show you where panels are likely to be going and where landscape buffers, visual impact buffers and ecology areas are going. So we actually have something a bit more concrete to talk around. But yeah, as we've just kicked off and just launched this project, all we've got is the sort of boundary of the land we've secured to date. So yeah, apologies, it's not enough information for you just now, but hopefully we can rectify that as we move through the design process.
All right, next question is how do you plan to access the site during construction, bearing in mind the narrowness of the roads either side of the site?
Yeah, happy to take this one. A bit of a stock answer, unfortunately, as I just said, we've just kicked off the project. We need to undertake a number of surveys to make sure and to finalise these sort of details. And this again will be coming out in those design workshops. What we have done is secured a number of frontages to roads. So there are the roads that come from Great Casterton to Pickworth. We accept they are narrow, but there is also the A1, which we face up to. So we've got a number of options. We don't know what is best yet until we do the surveys. Obviously, the A1 has the benefit of no construction traffic going through any of the sensitive villages and smaller roads, but that needs to be balanced off against highway and road safety. So yeah, we have a number of options. But yeah, until we've done the surveys and worked with the relevant technical consultees, unfortunately we can't tell you. But as I say, we will have the answers moving forward. And when we get to that design stage, we'll be able to say, this is where we're looking to access the site and take on opinions for that.
All right, the next question is what consideration have you given to the cumulative effect of the countryside from this and Mallard Pass Sophie, can you talk a bit about the EIA and how it assesses cumulative impacts?
Yes, happy to take that. So quite an important part of the environmental impact assessment, which we're at the very start of preparing, is that assessment of cumulative impacts. So we've got a project team of various specialists, including, for example, landscape and visual impact consultants, looking at this. And of course, going back to the whole point about scheme design, we're very aware of the Mallard Pass consent, and also aware on the other side that you've got the Bullfox opportunity area, and we're going to design our scheme to respond to those sites appropriately. It will be assessed as part of the upcoming design work.
Next question, I think is for Erin or Rosie. It says, which villages will receive community benefit and when will that discussion start?
I'm happy to take that one. I think the community benefit package is something we need to ascertain early and be upfront about. There's a lot of questions that we need to answer, and I think that's something we'll be doing in liaison with the community. Question number one, what is the community? Totally agree with your question. How far does that extend, and how far should the community benefit reach? So yeah, I think as we will be progressing this, we'll work out what the budget is, because I think that's really important to be transparent. There's no point having a discussion unless you know what's actually achievable. So yeah, over the next sort of few months, we'll be working up our strategy for that. And yeah, sitting down with you guys, we'll come to the table with a figure, and working with the local community to understand, A, what is the community? How big is it? How small is it? Where do you draw the line around that? And then B, what would the community like to see in terms of benefits? You know, what would actually improve the quality of your life?
All right. Oh, this is hopefully an easy question for you, Erin. It says, what does connecting look like? Is it above ground or underground cabling?
Yeah, easy. And so that is underground. So on the plan earlier, it was quite a wide area. That's because we've done some high-level environmental mapping. So we've chosen quite a wide area just as an area of search to undertake an impact assessment of. However, once we have our point of connection confirmed, we'll then be able to confirm which one of those sort of legs you would that were coming off the site boundary we'll be using. Then we can undertake some further environmental surveys. But the actual corridor of the cable is probably about the width of a single track road. So in comparison, much smaller. So this will be underground, and with this sort of smallness, if you would, of the cable route, this allows it to be micro-sited as well. So obviously we can go around sensitive receptors, you know, any sort of archaeological or heritage impacts, or yeah, just anything, soil surveys, and just trying to undertake a cable route that has the least impact yeah, on the environment essentially and people.
All right, the next question is back to the concept plan. It says, can I ask what percentage of the land highlighted would be used for environmental mitigation? Where on the highlighted land do you see the mitigation land being? Visual impact is a concern of ours, as I'm sure it is for the local residents of the villages.
Shall I take that one? In terms of percentage of the land for environmental mitigation, as we're so early on in the process and we've not started the design workshops or design process yet, I'm afraid I don't have an answer to that, but we'll be wanting to discuss that and assess that as part of the design workshops and involve the community and any local stakeholders, for example, neighbouring businesses, in decisions around where we have you know, mitigation land, whether that be landscape buffers or ecological enhancement.
All right, the next question is about the land. It says, has the land been purchased, or are you working on an option to purchase depending on the outcome, or will it be rented or let for a period? Erin, can you take this one?
Yeah, sure. So we've secured the land to rent for the period of the solar farm. So that triggers if we are successful in the planning application, we will then rent the solar farm land for 60 years. After that point, the site is then decommissioned and restored to its previous condition and returned to the landowner.
All right, another question. What type of panels are you likely to use and where are they sourced?
Not sure I fully understand in terms of what type of panels. I think the only answer I can give that is they'll be fixed, so they won't be tilt. And just in terms of sourcing, that's something we'll pick up after we have secured permission if we're successful. We'll undertake a detailed procurement strategy. Rosie, I don't know if you have anything more just to add on sort of
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I think it's worth mentioning that Akira are members of Solar Energy UK, and they're a trade body for the industry, and we have signed on to their UK industry supply chain statement, which basically is a statement for those who have signed up to it to increase transparency for ethical sourcing of solar panels, and as well as being more transparent in how that process works. So that is something that Akira is very passionate about, and when the time comes to secure solar panels, that is something that we take very seriously. So we look forward to being transparent about that.
And we had a follow-up question to say, yes, I was asking if they are fixed or not. So they are fixed.
Yeah, fixed. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. I think we're back to kind of alternatives in site selection. It says, why not put solar panels onto new houses and new commercial buildings rather than covering Rutland? Rutland Water took thousands of acres, then Mallard Pass, and now Kilnside potentially. This is removing productive farmland. Sophie, are you able to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I think the main thing is, in order to deliver the amount of renewable energy that's needed to enable the transition from fossil fuel generated energy, sites of this nature are required at the moment. Unfortunately, I mean, there is a significant increase, as you'll have noticed, in terms of rooftop panel delivery, but these sites are still needed to get to where we need to be in terms of the transition to renewable energy.
And on the agricultural land question, there's a follow-up question that says around 40% of Mallard Pass is being built on grade 2 and grade 3A agricultural land, i.e. best and most versatile, which shouldn't be developed. A proper BMV soil survey should be done at a 1 sample per hectare resolution. What resolution of survey will you undertake for your soil survey? Are you able to talk about that, Sophie?
I can't answer the detailed question about resolution of survey, but I'm sure we can respond separately if needed, or upload an answer to our Q&A on the website. But in terms of assessing the land, that is absolutely forming part of the environmental impact assessment. So those surveys are ongoing in terms of ascertaining what the grade of the land is. And in terms of designing the site and where the panels are going, that is one of the considerations, is to avoid, where possible, those higher grade parcels of land.
Okay, we have 2 questions remaining. If you have other questions in mind, please enter them now. So the first question says, this will be the new vista on the gateway to Rutland from the south. We are a tourist destination based on our rural topography. Will this be a consideration?
Yes. Sorry, Aaron, you go.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to say the same point. Yes, it will be. As we said, we undertake a landscape and visual assessment. What that does is identify receptors, so anyone who can see the site and understands their impact on those and how sensitive those areas are. So within the landscape and visual assessment, these points will be considered, as will public rights of way, views from there, and yeah, just views from any sort of receptor essentially. So these are all undertaken and considered within the landscape visual assessment. And that is then what feeds into part of the design to understand where the solar panels can and can't go.
Could I also just briefly add as well, we are doing a socio-economic assessment as part of the EIA as well, which is specifically assessing impact on nearby tourism, business and uses. So it will be fully assessed.
All right, the last question, it says you talk about a 60-year life, but most information on panels suggests 30-year life. Will you be replacing the panels at the 30-year point?
Yeah, so it might not be set at the 30-year point. Obviously, as we own and operate the project, from our point of view, I think from everyone's point of view, it wants to be running at maximum efficiency. So obviously, the site will be regularly monitored. Maintenance will be there where necessary, and any panel that isn't performing or is damaged or whatever will be replaced to ensure that we sort of maximise our output from the solar farm.
Excellent. Well, that has now completed our list of questions. So if you have anything else that you want to ask before we sign off, do please enter it now. And otherwise, okay. We have one quick one. It says, where will you be holding the consultations? I can take this one to say that we don't know yet. So we will consult on our strategy for consulting. We have to do that with the local authorities, and that will help us establish where and when to hold further consultation events. And the next question is, will this recording be available on the website? Yes, it will. We will upload it as soon as it is ready. All right. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to engage with us this evening. And if you have any further questions, you can always get in touch through our communication channels. And we hope you have a good evening. Thank you very much.